I'm Darcy and I want to show you today how to create an acrylic poured painting using Golden High Flow Acrylic paints. You could use acrylic ink, but I just love golden paint, so I use them. So High Flow Golden Acrylic with Liquitex pouring medium. This I use because it's designed for painting. I know it's not going to have any longevity issues. It keeps the paint looking like it's wet. It dries with a really high gloss effect. I'm going to show you a sample. Here's one after it's done. You can see the reflection. It's really shiny. It's got layers when you look at it up close. If I hold it at different angles, it looks a little bit different. So this is after putting my first layers down, and I haven't worked back into it yet, which is what I typically like to do. This is a friend's painting. She made this. She, at her first time doing it, so she had no prior experience, but also turned out awesome. So this is one that anybody can have really great results with, which is why it's fun to do. So what we need is we need little plastic cups. We need some craft sticks, little wooden sticks, or whatever you have on hand, straws, pencils, whatever works to be stirring with. The Liquitex pouring medium. Before this existed, I used to use a matte medium and mix it with water, and you can do that kind of thing too. You can use paint and water and just pour like that and just use regular acrylic, but the paint will separate from the canvas if there's too much water, so you have to be careful about that ratio. You don't want to put too much water in there. You want to make sure the paint's going to make sure it adheres to the surface. And then I have on the table just plastic sheeting. I've got some paper towels handy. I've got some brushes nearby, and I've got gloves on because it's messy, already making a mess. So the first thing you want to do is, oh, and your painting needs, your canvas needs to be propped up. So I just have 4 plastic cups turned down and that's sitting on top. I also like to have a spray bottle handy. Okay, so now I want to take and mix up my colors. I am looking for a palette that makes me feel cheerful. So that's kind of my guiding light behind what colors I chose, and you want to make sure you get your colors exactly what you want them to be now, because that's what they'll look like when they're dry even. I mean, it stays really close. So spend the time thinking about what kind of mood you want your painting to have, or what you want this to express. Get your palette all laid out, and the way that you do that, I'm going to demonstrate. I want to shake this up really good before I put it into a cup. Put some paint in, doesn't need very much. Just a few seconds of a squirt, and then I pour this on top. Depending on how much you want to use, you can vary that. So if you know you're going to be using a whole lot of green, you may put more in. And then you ask yourself, do you like this shade, or do you need to mix another color with it? You get to decide. I kind of like the way this is looking, so I'm going to very slowly stir it. If I stir it quickly, then I'll get bubbles, and it'll create bubbles in my painting. So I'm going to stir it slowly till these are nice and mixed up. Okay, and then I look and say, do I like that color? Yeah, I do like that. I'm going to keep that just as is. All right, and then I keep some cups on hand so that I can use those as I get working. Okay, so to start this, doesn't really matter where you start as far as lights, darks. What comes down on top of other paints will actually lay on top, so you do think about that as you're layering. But start with, let's say I'm going to start with a light color here. This is such a cheerful yellow that I'm just going to start by pouring it. Now the thing about this paint is wherever I pour it, it pretty much stays. It doesn't move a whole lot because it's really thick. If I wanted to change that and I want that paint to move around more, I can simply tilt my canvas and allow it to run. I can also use my spray bottle and get it wet and let it kind of fray out. So I'm just going to show you what that will do. I'm not going to use a ton of water, but if I just spritz it, it's going to make these edges move, kind of like with watercolor, right? So they're not going to stay put so much. Then I can let it run a little bit. Now, when I lay my next color next to it, I want to think, what's going to happen when these two colors mix? Do I want that effect? So just be mindful of that as you place it. And then little drips and things will happen. You just kind of get to work around them. There are no mistakes. You'll be able to play with it all as you keep working with it. So I'm going to move to a darker color. Put this right outside of here. And I try to not think too much in this process, like if I want to convey a certain emotion or I want to have a color scheme fit a certain feel, that's great, but I kind of like to just be meditative and slow and just watch it happen because it's so beautiful. And as it happens, I can take one of these popsicle sticks and pull the paint and kind of start to shape it into what I want it to do. Some of these lines will stay, and if I use a lot of this medium, what happens is it gets it starts to swallow the colors up. Sorry, it's hard to talk and paint for me, so excuse me if my speech is getting strange. I like that, but it's so thick, and I want to just have a little bit more variation in it, so I'm gonna add a little more water because I kind of like to see what will happen with it. Not a ton. Let that run a little bit. I'm gonna pull another color in. Pour. So one thing about this paint is you want to put paint, if I work over here, then work over here separately, and then I want to merge the two. They do tend to dry as there's, if they're separated. So if I work with paint next to each other, then it will stay wet and be able to move into what I just poured, which I personally want to create that effect. So I'm going to keep working next to wet paint. Cross over up here, maybe some more green. You can also get a pipette and suck up paint and drop it that way. Or you can just do like this if you want to put paint in a specific spot. I just kind of look for effects that I want to create. I want more of that yellow. And if I don't work up next to that, that'll dry pretty quickly. And it's really thick. It's a little hard to see, but it's quite thick. Spray that and let it bleed a little bit. Want some more yellow over here. And it runs out really quick because I've been pouring this yellow on really thick. I like that yellow, it's just so happy. Put it up here. I want it to come around from here too. So you can kind of, as you go, see the way the paint's moving and figure out your composition from there. How do you want the paint to be moving? What's the whole feeling of this painting going to be? I'm running out, so I'll have to mix some more if I want that. Green in here. So I'm going to fill in all these little holes with color. Actually, I want there to be more green through here too. And I want some more green here. This, I think this will be the bottom, so I'm going to put some of this deeper turquoise down here. Down here. Let's see, and I definitely want more turquoise, so I'm going to mix a little more of that up. So one thing you'll notice is if you're doing a whole lot of pouring with medium, the canvas gets way down and it'll start to pool in the middle. So that's one thing to be mindful of. Ideally, honestly, if you do this on a board, it's even better because then you can pour it on thick. But I typically use some water too so it doesn't get too thick. And when you have a smaller canvas, a lot of times you're okay. Next to that. Now with some of these edges, I actually want it to kind of bleed out a little bit. So I'm going to spray. Just kind of let it do that in some places. Let it bleed out. And then I'm going to let it run a little because I like that look. And sometimes I can let it bleed up to the edge and it's going to drip right off the edge when I do that. I'm just going to watch this. The more I do that, the more the colors are going to mix. So I have to be aware of that and decide how much of that do I really want. Now I want to take this stick and pull some things. Like I want this color to come up off the edge. I'm going to pull it like that. Want that to come up off the edge. And then I can actually use this and I can lead it over the side so then later I don't have to paint the edges. And this process is sped up right now. I'm not taking my time because I want to cover the whole thing and show you. I would normally go more slowly and have some nice music playing as I'm working, but I love to work next to daylight and windows so that I can feel calm. So this way I get my sides covered. And then it starts to drip off the edges, so I take and do this. As I'm doing that, I want a little bit of that color up here, so I'm going to take and just put a few little pieces of that in here. Just kind of let it run. Also want a little bit more turquoise coming over here. I'm going to take and push that to the edge too. I'm going to go around this whole thing and move it off the edge so that all edges are extended. I think I want that to be good. And then this, I'm taking, putting right up to the edge, letting that fall. I'm gonna lead that up to the edge too. And you can see how it just drips off the edge. And then the drips will dry pretty quickly and be thick. So, and you can see as I move that up to the edge, it just lets all this paint kind of seep off, which is neat. If you don't want so much medium on there. And then look what's happening down here. It's just puddling off. You could catch that if you had like a smaller cup. You could catch that and use that for another painting. I'm going to pull this stuff off the edge. And also I've got to really look and see if I like the way this is looking because it's going to start staying there. I mean, it doesn't, I don't have a ton of work time from when I put it there and when it's dry. So I have to really be thinking, do I like the way this is going? Do I need to change the movement here? Do I need to add more color? Do I need to use this to pull things around? And right now I'm actually really liking this, so I don't feel like I need to do that. But up here I see some white spots that I want to fill. If I see one area where there's too much of one color and it just looks like a big block of that, then I will usually layer it with another color because when it dries, there's this ability to see what's on top and what's on bottom, at least a little bit. So I want to make sure to take advantage of that neat effect. So basically, whatever you end up with here is pretty close to how it's going to look, unless if you use more water, then that will change it. But if it's still mostly medium, it's going to stay put pretty nicely. And that's going to be about how it looks when it dries. And again, if it's too sectioned off or strong, any lines, then you can take and move it around with your hand. Just pick it up and move it. You can also blow on it. Just see how that moves the paint just when I blow. As it starts to dry, you can't do that. It'll start thickening up and making it so it doesn't work out. Another thing that I didn't mention is if you put two colors in a cup and you mix them a little bit, but don't mix them all the way, and you pour it, those colors will stay pretty separate as you pour it onto your canvas. So that's just something to think about and decide what kind of effects you want with that. I want a little bit more blue down here, so I'm just gonna work that in. I want it to be a little more organic. Great, and I think that yellow is kind of distracting, so I'm gonna move that to some green. So I'm gonna look over everything, look for white spots, see if I wanna take any of those away. And if not, all I need to do is finish up with this side because it's still not covered and I need to do that while it's wet and to pull that paint over the edge, and then it's going to be done, at least my first layer. So what I will do after this one is finished is I will take and let this dry. It usually needs at least an overnight, sometimes it needs longer. So I'm doing this, you know, at 7 o'clock at night, so in the morning I should be safe to move it. I might want to move it somewhere and still keep it flat on its back because I have set them upright to come back and notice that the paint moved a little bit, like just slowly, and does kind of a weird ripple effect when that happens. After this dries, I'm going to look at it and really spend time just staring at it, and especially if I put it by my bed and look at it when I first wake up, that's typically a great time for me to see what kind of imagery is in it that I might want to paint forward and layer. So maybe I'll show that video next, is what I did from this point. But for now, I'm pretty happy with this, so I'm gonna call this good. So until next time, there's your first tutorial, and then the next one will be soon to follow. Thanks so much for watching.